One of these days I'll have life figured out, but as it turns out, today's not that day yet. Land Rover probably planned on this happening. They're like 15 years down the road, there's gonna be some guy in Iowa who is gonna cut this thing in half. Welcome back. To what has truly become the Lost Cause Ranch. I don't know what I'm doing here. I guess what I should say is I know what I'm attempting to do, and that is rearrange all the stuff in this side of the shop. At what point in time does collecting become hoarding? But no, I'm jockeying stuff around so we can continue working on the LR4 truck. Today we're gonna work on making the cab one whole piece. As of right now, the rear cap is just bolted on. We wanna make that a permanent fixture to the front of the LR4. But to do that, we need a little more real estate. So I'm attempting to move all the stuff in here. I'm gonna keep the same amount of stuff in the same amount of space, and somehow in my head, I'm gonna create more room. I don't think it's gonna work, but we're at least gonna try. But no, we need to get the lightweight and the LR4 chassis out from underneath the cab. And with some quick measuring, I think we can fit them on this side of the shop. We just need to scoot everything down a little bit. See, look at how much room that gained. I'm gonna trap myself in here. Keep it tight. But that really opened up the front here. I think with that, if we move all this stuff, the LR4 chassis can fit in here long ways. The lightweight was short enough before to fit in there, so we'll have plenty of room. And I think we can fit that other truck cap in front of it, so we don't have to figure out somewhere to go with that, and we keep that protected. So we're gonna rearrange some more stuff over here and try and jockey everything around. Then we can start working on this guy. All right, we called a little bit of an audible on layout, but I think it'll work. Or at least we're gonna try. When you got 10 pounds in a 5-pound sack, we gotta move stuff as we move stuff. So we gotta move all this out over to that side to give us room up here. So I went ahead and stopped at Harbor Freight and grabbed another set of wheel dollies. So I should have enough to leave under this one now. And once we get everything in place, what I'm thinking with the new layout will make sense, hopefully, but we'll see. All right, that is its resting place for now. And we're gonna put the lightweight here. That way, if we wanna work on anything with the chassis, we can just roll the lightweight straight back, and with the wheel dollies, pull that straight out, and we'll have room all the way around it. So I think that is our best use of space. I think the lightweight will tuck in there nicely. We have the other truck cab and the LR4 parts kind of tucked up against the wall. Lightweight is obviously much shorter than the LR4 chassis. So with that stuff in front, it should still end up on this side of the old wall. I am getting kind of tired of pushing stuff around though. One of these days I'll have life figured out, but as it turns out, today's not that day yet, so we keep pushing. Kind of forget how tall this thing got once we put 35s on it, but we need to get the windshield down just to get it out from underneath the cab, and then we can pop it back up. I'm out of breath. Look at how compact we made everything over there, and everything over here is wide open. That's wild. It hasn't been like that in frickin' months. Now that we made a little breathing room in the shop, we can get to today's actual project, and that is to start sorting out and finishing off the cab itself. If you remember, this rear fiberglass cap is just bolted into place. It is not permanently bonded to the body, but after today, it will be. Or Hopefully it will be. But before we lower it down, we're gonna kind of prep the underneath here. And the first thing we need to do is get rid of our rear HVAC lines. On the passenger side rocker here, we have heater core lines going to the back. And on the driver's side, we have the evaporator for the AC going to the back. But being we cut the rear of this off, we probably don't need those anymore. So we're gonna get these out of the way. Huh, that's nice. And then up here on the firewall, they actually split off nice from the front lines. So we'll end up cutting them where they tee off and we'll TIG weld those shut. And it'll just be kind of a basic vehicle without rear HVAC. I'm just not quite tall enough to reach those guys to undo them. So what we'll do here is just cut them off below this flange, and they are aluminum, so we'll be able to TIG weld them closed pretty easily. And then once that's done, they'll just bolt right back into place and it'll be like they were never even there. After we get our cap off, we do have to attend to this. Even though we cut off the rustiest part of the LR4, we still have a little that kind of is on the surface up here. It's not terrible yet, but we're gonna get everything wire wheeled, cleaned up, encapsulated, and then underneath here, I think we're gonna go ahead and maybe like bed liner it after the cap is attached and give it one consistent coating underneath. Help make everything cohesive once it's all attached. But before we get the cap off, we need to get it down to the ground and have it sit on some jack stands, because with the way it is too short to not lift from underneath where the fiberglass cap is. So can't really get it off if it's lifted up from that. At least I don't know of a way to do that. But that's all right, because we'll just stick it on a few jack stands. That's a little more manageable height too. Now at this point in time, the only thing holding it on is those hinge bolts that we put in before. These will go back in, but instead of just being held on by that, we'll have some panel bond that'll go all the way over top and down the other side here as well. That one was a little tighter. So this is almost guaranteed to be the last time this cab ever comes off. So the panel bond adhesive we're using is like a structural component. Even most new manufacturers don't weld body panels and everything together. So like truck bed sides, those are typically panel bonded now. And you either have to use a lot of heat or destroy the part coming off. And being this is fiberglass, more than likely this lip will be broken off if it needs to come off again. Man, I forgot how much wiring we're gonna have to sort through as well. This is all staying. We just need to separate it out some. We're gonna try and keep all the modules together that we had. I'll pull that box back out again so we can see what we're doing there. More than likely, we're gonna have to build some sort of rack behind the seats to house all the modules. Being most of them sat back in the back corner of the vehicle, that is no longer in existence. Somehow this sounded like a good idea in my head when I started, but now the reality is a little different. No, it's gonna be fine. Pretty much everything wiring wise is gonna stay in our little single cab minus this plug. This plug is the one that goes to our main little bulkhead on the chassis back here. So that's gonna have to be somewhere near the back. I guess we could probably relocate it some towards the front, but it's still gonna have to come outside the cab and connect to this guy. And looking at it, I kind of like this grommet. Maybe we can kind of cut this back, slide it back, because we're gonna have to pass through the floor more than likely. Thinking somewhere in this area to get that out, and that would be a nice weather tight seal. So we'll probably use that, but we need to split off here and kind of separate it out so that this can hang out by itself all the way back to about here. So up top here, our upper little roof rail and the roof itself is pretty much ready to go to be bonded along with our C-pillar. All we need to do there is grind off the paint, which isn't a big deal. You want to bond to bare metal. If we bond to the paint, it's only as strong as the adhesion of the paint to the metal. So we need it stronger than that. So that part and our lower rocker is pretty easy to deal with. Just needs to get down to bare metal. Then we slap a bunch of panel bond on and go to town. Yuki is sniffing out what we need to address before we can put the cap back on. So rear of the rocker here and our floor meet up with this area of the cab. So the rocker sits right about there, and then that floor sits right along this little bump. And I want to give the floor something actual to attach to. See, I'm thinking if we just run a strip of panel bond on this thin sheet metal, it just may not hold up and will probably crack. And then I also want to kind of cap off this area some so we can prevent some future corrosion points, at least as much as possible. So what I'm thinking is we're going to make like a flat panel. It's going to be about as thick as these little support channels up top here on the floor. And we got these threaded bosses in the floor on both sides. Those were where the rear seats mounted. So those are pretty sturdy. So I think the game plan here is we're gonna make a flat section that kind of contours with this rocker, keeps that shape, then shrinks up because we can't have it hang low because the chassis and everything kind of takes up this space there. So it can't be at rocker level. So it'll come up, follow this floor. It'll be somewhat thin in this area and will stay about 2 inches thick all the way over and match on the other side. And that'll be a flat plate that is bent 90 degrees on top of this hump here, and we will bolt it here and here. And on top of the bolts, what we'll do is run some panel bond on this edge, and that'll end up being our little rear finish plate, and then that'll give us a nice flat surface to panel bond to on this side, which should keep everything locked together. We're gonna be bonded all the way down on this rocker, so that's gonna be pretty strong there. We're obviously gonna be bonded along this rail, along with the bolts into our hinge mounts. So I'm not super worried about that exact area being the strongest thing in the world. And back on the back here, back on the back, once again a wordsmith. I think if we give ourselves that 2-inch strip to bond to all the way across, that's gonna be plenty strong on that. This cap is actually pretty solid, so it's not for strength that we're going thicker with the bond back here. I just don't want it to vibrate loose and then become somewhere that is a leak point and create a mess that could get rusty. And speaking of rust, this back closure panel, I'm gonna make that out of aluminum instead of steel. I originally thought maybe I'd weld it all together, but we're never gonna have a piece of bare steel coated as well as the factory can coat their steel. So that would end up rusting before everything else. That panel bond will protect our cut edge because that'll be encapsulated inside of that. So that shouldn't be a corrosion point. We have weep holes on everything, so the moisture should be able to leave if it gets in there. So I think aluminum on this is our best plan for the longevity of this thing. I'm probably never gonna drive this in salt, but if someone in the future ends up with it, I want it to not turn to crap. So I guess it's time to make up the aluminum panel and get everything cleaned up. That doesn't sound that fun, actually. You know, as it turns out, there's no real instruction booklet on how to cut a car in half and make it into a truck. So like always, we're just kind of winging it along the way, and we're doing what I determined to be the best thought in my head. So more than likely, you guys will criticize me down below. I'm used to it. So 30 inches. And we need something 65.5 inches wide. unless you go ahead and rent. Everything that we're going to paint at this moment back here, we got scuffed up and we just vacuumed all the loose dust. We're going to wipe it down, get everything else off. Now what we're doing here isn't a crazy amount of paint. I just want to get the inside of the rockers. You know, some days I'm surprised I'm even competent enough to wake up in the morning. So the next few minutes of the video, you get to listen to me explaining how I'm doing stuff instead of me explaining how I'm doing stuff as part of the video. I think in the film industry, they call that a voiceover. I call it fixing a mistake. See, I went ahead and did this. Which apparently took out most of the microphone. I didn't realize it because I'm the dumbest person I know. But anyways, here we are cutting the aluminum to make that rear closure panel. We're using that circular saw once again. That thing works slick as all get out. Not only was the microphone not working, the frickin' press brake quit working again. It needs a 90-degree bend in it. We had a good solid 2 weeks of it working, but it was throwing a bunch of errors and it was locking out and then it was losing signal. I'm just kind of over the thing. I think on Monday I'm going to make some phone calls and see if they want to come pick it back up. They can either replace it or at this point I can just scrap it. I mean, I'm sure we'll get it figured out. It's just not enjoyable by any means. I really thought we were over the hump on that one and we apparently aren't. But anyways, we got our one bend done and thankfully, that's all we needed to do was our one bend. Honestly, it's probably good that the microphone wasn't working because I would have had to bleep out a ton of words, if you know what I mean. And when it does work, it makes a nice bend, and that piece right there is gonna work out nicely. We just need to make 2 extension pieces out that kind of cover the rocker panel here. And they need to be pretty tight so they don't run into clearance issues with the cab. So we get out the cardboard aided design once again. My favorite type of tool, and look at how nice that drawing is. And then we take our handy dandy scissors, get that cut into shape, and a funky looking shape it is. And that'll just get mirrored for the other side. We just need to make 2 of them, so we transferred it over to the aluminum, got out our bandsaw, and just started chopping away. The bandsaw doesn't have a whole lot of throat, so we had to do some creative cutting, but we managed to work our way through it. Just a lot of slicing and slicing and slicing, and then we came up with these 2 guys. They actually turned out pretty cool looking, and they fit up nicely on that. So all we're going to do is clamp them into place, run some tacks on them, and get that all welded out. And for that, we're just going to weld the seam. And on sheet metal like that, there's gonna be a natural V on how it pulls when it tacks. And then what we're gonna do is just kind of flip that over so it V's this way. And then when we weld it, it'll shrink up that top and pull it flat. And it's a shame I put those big tacks on it when it was clamped to the body because the rest of the weld looks nice. I love a nice TIG weld on aluminum. But it really doesn't matter because we're just going to grind it smooth on both sides. That panel came together pretty nicely. Would have been a lot easier if we didn't have to make it in 3 pieces, but I just didn't have a long enough piece of aluminum laying around. I figured instead of going by another sheet, we could just piece one together and it'll work just fine. And I'm not sure if this is a little closure panel or a piece of abstract art. That is some funky looking stuff going on. But yeah, so we got it and it's fit up pretty nicely. We have just a tiny bit of overhang for that panel bond to grab to and have nice adhesion, but it's tight enough to that rocker that it's still gonna fit up nicely to the inside of the cab without messing any clearances up. And this is about 2.5 inches thick, so that'll give us a nice bond point across the back. And that rust encapsulator turned out pretty nice as well. I think we'll probably do the whole floor in that before we do anything else. That's an awful nice finish. So I think beyond just the floor, we'll probably go over the chassis with it as well, along with finishing off the rest of the inside rocker. That's gonna keep it nice and protected before we throw some undercoat or whatever on it. So this is something that no one is ever gonna see. Once we bond this thing together, that'll never be seen. It's gonna be hidden by the cap, but to do it correctly, or at least in my mind correctly, it takes some time. We spent a fair amount of time making up that piece. And this is what makes projects like this take so long. We could have just left it and just slammed a bunch of foam or seam sealer in there to close that gap up and just kind of kicked the can down the road and let a future person deal with the repercussions and the problems that would arise. We didn't kind of seal everything up correctly and make sure we have somewhere to actually attach the cab to, but we're kind of particular. I'm not a perfectionist, I'm just particular. So we spend a lot of time on oddball stuff, but that's just the way it goes sometimes. So I guess what I'm getting at is if you feel discouraged in your projects and you're particular like me, don't worry. There's a lot of us putting in this type of work. You just don't get to see it a lot. When this rolls up to a Rover event, this isn't gonna translate to anything that anyone sees, but you should do it correctly anyways. The best saying I've heard in a long time was, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. So don't take shortcuts just because you see a bunch of people on Instagram or YouTube finishing out projects in weeks. They're probably shortcutting somewhere. It's kind of cool looking. I almost don't want to cover it up. But speaking of covering up, we kind of ran into a little bit of a snafu. Snafu, I don't know if I've ever used that word before. But it is Saturday and our panel bond was supposed to be here on Friday. It got delayed to show up today. Well, I just checked the tracking and it got delayed once again. It is now showing Monday, which doesn't really help us for this weekend. So it appears that we are not gonna be able to attach this guy in this video, which really sucks because I was really looking forward to having this as all one piece, because then we can move along to figuring out a few other things coming up in the project. It's not the end of the world. This has a ton of stuff we can still do. So we're not gonna quit just yet. Since we have the welder out, I think we'll get those rear HVAC lines all closed up. And would you believe that? A Land Rover engine leaking oil? Why is it still leaking oil? It'll be interesting to get the intake manifold off this. This thing must be plumb full down below. And here we're just gonna kind of play around with some fun. This is real thin wall tubing, and it is aluminum, so we're just gonna kind of try and fill it without a filler piece. Fill it without a filler piece. And see if we can just kind of work our way around at low amperage and have some nice control over it, just as a challenge. No other purpose besides just keeping the control skills up to date. And then on the heater lines, we just pinched them tight close and just ran a bead down the center to close those off. See, I told you earlier that it looked like it was never there. Now we just have our little stubs installed. We threw a couple new O-rings on the AC side. The heater core is welded off. And now we just have what attaches to the engine. So that'll be a much cleaner setup underneath the cab. And it'll save us some money. We got less refrigerant to fill it up with. I guess a little less coolant too. But I guess then we have less coolant in the system, so we don't have as much heat transfer capability. So maybe it's worse. Who knows? But since Amazon with their wonderful shipping service freed up a little time today, let's talk about today's video. No, I'm just kidding. They don't pay me anything. I don't even know where I got this box from. No, we're gonna take a peek at what we have in the box, and that is every single module that we removed from the back of this thing. So I guess since we have a few extra days until the panel bond stuff shows up, well, hopefully a few extra days, the applicator device is lost. So we'll have the panel bond, but no way to use it. That's sweet. Until we get that, we're gonna work up a game plan on what to do with all this and start figuring out where to go with all the wiring. I don't think I'm gonna change the actual wiring itself, just how some of it's bundled together. There is so much stuff, and then we're gonna have to start working on figuring out where we're gonna go with all of this stuff. You know, now that we lay it all out, that's not actually all that bad. A lot of this is related to the navigation and radio stuff. Like we got our satellite radio module, our CD changer. We probably don't necessarily need that, but no, we might. We want the people behind us to have something to watch. But my plan here is to plug everything back in, and then we can kind of trick the LR4 into thinking that the back half of it still exists. We're gonna have to jump some hurdles with the airbag stuff because the curtain airbags obviously can't fit because there's no roof. So that's a road we're gonna have to cross once we have everything up and operational. But all this stuff should stay happy. I mean, we're gonna have some soft fault codes in the modules for stuff missing, but we shouldn't have a ton of warnings on the dash besides the airbag light for the moment. Now the dilemma is, where do we go with all of this? I don't think we're gonna be able to ultimately have that figured out until the cap is in place, so we know exactly what amount of room we're working with back here. So we have some floor space we can utilize. So my thoughts are, we can either build some trays, brackets along the floor that are kinda low, but that may limit how far the seat can travel forward and backwards, which I don't want to do. So my thoughts are, maybe we can build a bracket along the back here, then just kind of splay the modules out, get rid of a lot of the factory brackets and make our own. Then a lot of the stuff could sit along this back. I think that might be the move, but I want to start to kind of peel back the wiring and wrap my head around this situation. I'm hoping I can remember where everything goes. We have just a few things that are gonna have to end up outside the cab. Like I mentioned earlier, this one is the main one. And then we're gonna have to either extend these out further or peel them back and make this all happy. We've got a bunch of grounds going on. This is our left side taillight harness, so we need those to get to the back. For two reasons. We need taillights, obviously. Then we also need to hook up to our trailer brake harness. We're still gonna wanna be able to tow with this thing. I'm not overly concerned about the tire pressure monitoring system because with the steel wheels it has on it currently, I don't have sensors in there anyways. So we'll just have that turned off. Let's see what we got. We also need to decide if we wanna have our parking sensors working. I think that's a feasible possibility. If we can stretch this harness back there, that may be something we can do. But I'm also not sure if it's worth the hassle because we're not gonna have factory bumpers on this front or rear. So that may just be something that we should just forego. It's gonna have steel bumpers front and rear, so we can just run into stuff. We don't need to worry about sensors. There is a boatload of wires. I think we're gonna be in good shape. The only one we're gonna have to change here is the ground, which we can handle that. Otherwise, this bundle of wires stays pretty separate all the way up. So we should be able to stretch that out to the rear outside. See, Land Rover probably planned on this happening. They're like, 15 years down the road, there's gonna be some guy in Iowa who is gonna cut this thing in half. So we need to make sure it's got provisions so he can. Yeah, that's nice. This is slick. Yeah, this is gonna be nice. So they got a bunch of goop to keep the pass-through weather tight. So we'll have to do the same, but we'll be able to slide this grommet down to wherever we need it. And I think it's gonna look like we're gonna cut a hole in the floor right around there and pass that through. All this stuff will stay inside the cab down here. We'll probably tuck it beneath the carpet and bundle it up. I'm thinking taillight harness, we're probably just gonna have to cut and extend because too much of the module stuff runs through. And what we'll do is I'll get rid of these plugs, cut it in here, and we have a bunch of these Deutsch connectors that we can make up. We got variety from like 2-pin all the way up to like 12, I think. So we'll just make up an extension harness. These are weatherproof, weather tight. Then we'll use our factory plugs on the other end of that extension harness. So that way we can tie into our brake controller stuff. Depending on how far we determine we need this to go out, this stuff will all end up underneath the carpet. We'll tidy it up. We can't route that until we have all the modules locked down into their final location. So it's going to be a lot of steps that happen together along the way, like much of this project has been, but I'm super happy we're not going to have to go through depin this plug and extend everything out. This is just going to work pretty good. Now this side, we have much less going on. The only thing we need to bring out back is that tail light. Same thing, we'll make one extension harness. Is mainly radio and navigation, control stuff. I think this is gonna work out. We're gonna have no working rear heated seats because we have no rear seats. But outside of that, I'm thinking we'll make a bracket along the back here and just get everything sitting up against that. Once we have that all made, we have this nice structure rib here that we can make a panel and carpet it, and it'll almost look factory back there, I think. So in this area here, we'll have a false wall on the back of the cab. So it'll do two things. It'll house our modules, and it'll also be some extra sound deadening. To tell you the truth, I was worried about this mess. I knew we'd be able to tackle it, I just didn't know the amount of work it would be. So to recap that, we got our one big connector, and then we'll have two taillight harnesses going back. And actually, now that I think about it, we'll make that into one taillight harness going back. We'll take this guy and bundle him with the driver's side and make one extension harness, and that way we can run just along one frame rail and then split off to the side with that. That's our game plan. And once our panel bond shows up this week, it'll literally be less than an hour, and this will be one permanent piece. The cab will be one and ready to finish off. Figuring our little plate out was kind of the time-consuming part of getting that cab back on. Now it's just smearing a bunch of adhesive and bolting it together. And then I get to pretend to be a body guy. Fake it till you make it. But with that being said, I appreciate you guys watching. I appreciate you subscribing. We're chipping away at this thing, and I'm kind of disappointed we didn't get to attach the rear cab and make it officially a truck. But it's the way things go. We had a lot of stuff going on this week, and maybe someday you'll hear about that. But we'll catch you guys midweek with another video to let you know what's going on with everything else around here. We managed to get the white LR4 around back, and we need to start making that disappear, maybe along with some other stuff around here. And then next week's main video is either gonna be this getting put together as one piece along with a couple other things on it, or there's a potential of me being the dumbest person I know once again.